Beneath the massive shadow of Jupiter, the battlefield was eerily quiet. Space was vast, cold, and silent, but this silence was different. It carried the weight of fear and despair. The remnants of humanity's fleet floated like broken toys among the stars, their once proud ships now scared and battered. The war against the Vorthax had raged for years. The alien race was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Towering, insect-like beings, their ships were sleek, advanced, and ruthless. Their weapons tore through human defenses like paper, and their tactics left no room for mistakes. Humanity, once confident in its abilities, now stood on the edge of defeat. Captain Darius stared at the holographic display in the command center of his ship, the Resolute. His face was stern, his eyes scanning the scattered dots representing the few surviving human vessels. "What do we have left?" he asked, his voice heavy with fatigue. "Not much," replied Lieutenant Harris, his second in command. 15 ships, most of them damaged. The Vorthax still outnumber us 5-1. Darius clenched his fists. The odds were impossible. Every battle with the Vorthax ended the same way, with more human ships destroyed and fewer resources left to fight. And now the aliens were preparing for their final strike. Their massive mothership hovered in the distance, a monstrous shadow against the backdrop of Jupiter. Its presence alone was a reminder of humanity's vulnerability. "We can't run," Darius said, breaking the heavy silence in the room. "There's nowhere left to go. Earth is behind us, and if we fail here, there will be nothing left to defend." The crew nodded, but their faces showed doubt. They had heard those words before. They had fought bravely in every battle, but bravery wasn't enough against the Vorthax. Outside the ship, the battlefield stretched endlessly. Broken ships and debris floated silently, the remnants of earlier fights. Some of the debris still glowed faintly, the last traces of explosions that had claimed countless lives. The scene was haunting, a graveyard in space. Then, without warning, the ship's sensors beeped. A faint energy signal appeared on the screen. It was weak, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. "What is that?" Harris asked, leaning closer to the display. "It's coming from the far side of Jupiter," said Ensign Malik, the communications officer. "It's strange. It doesn't match any known human or Vorthax technology." Darius frowned. A signal like this could mean many things: a trap, a malfunction, or something else entirely. "Can we decode it?" he asked. "I'm working on it," Malik replied, his fingers flying over the controls. After a few tense moments, he looked up, his face pale. "It's a message." "What does it say?" Darius demanded. Malik hesitated before reading aloud. "Hold the line. Help is closer than it appears." The words hung in the air, their meaning unclear. Who sent the message? Was it a trick? The Vorthax were known for their psychological warfare, planting false hope to lure their enemies into traps. But this message felt different. It wasn't demanding action, it was giving reassurance. Darius paced the command center, his mind racing. If the message was true, it could change everything. But if it wasn't, it could lead to the end of humanity's resistance. "Captain," Harris said cautiously, "we can't trust an unknown signal. It could be the Vorthax trying to lure us into an ambush." Darius stopped and looked at the display again. The faint energy signal pulsed steadily, as if waiting for a response. "What if it's real?" he said quietly. "What if there really is help coming?" Harris didn't answer. The crew exchanged nervous glances, the weight of the decision falling heavily on all of them. Finally, Darius made his choice. "We'll hold our position," he said firmly. "If this is a trap, we'll face it head-on. But if it's not, if there's even a chance that help is coming, we owe it to humanity to stay and fight." The crew nodded, their resolve hardening. The ship's engines hummed as the Resolute adjusted its position, taking up a defensive stance. The other surviving ships followed suit, forming a loose formation around their captain's vessel. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. The Vorthax ships began to move, their sleek forms gliding through the darkness. The enemy was preparing for their final strike, their weapons glowing ominously. Darius gripped the edge of the console, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Hold the line," he whispered, echoing the mysterious message. "Hold the line." As the Vorthax fleet closed in, the faint signal near Jupiter's shadow pulsed again, stronger this time. Something was out there, hidden in the darkness. And whatever it was about to change the course of the battle. A whisper of hope. The Vorthax ships closed in, their formation tight and precise. Humanity's remaining fleet looked pitiful in comparison, scattered and battered. Inside the Resolute, Captain Darius kept his eyes locked on the display. The mysterious energy signal was growing stronger, its pulses now steady and deliberate, like the beating of a hidden heart. "Sir, the signal has changed," Ensign Malik said, his voice tinged with both fear and curiosity. "It's sending another message." Darius turned sharply. "What does it say?" Malik hesitated, his fingers flying across the console. A moment later, he read aloud. "Activate code Zeta 9. Coordinates attached. Do not falter." "Code Zeta 9. Harris echoed, confusion evident. "That's not in any of our protocols." "It's old," Darius said, his voice suddenly low and thoughtful. He leaned closer to the display, his brow furrowed. "Very old. From the early days of the war." The room fell silent. Few on the ship had ever heard of the Zeta codes. They were whispered about in military circles, relics of humanity's desperate efforts when the Vorthax first attacked. Some said they were decoys, others believed they were keys to hidden technology. But no one knew for sure. "Coordinates are locked," Malik reported. "They lead to the far side of Jupiter." Darius straightened, his resolve hardening. "Set a course." "We're going." "Captain, this could be a trap," Harris objected, his voice rising. "The Vorthax are already closing in. If we break formation—" "If we don't," Darius interrupted, "we'd die here anyway. This is the only lead we've had in months. If there's a chance it can help us, we have to take it." Harris said nothing, but his tense expression spoke volumes. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but they trusted their captain. Orders were relayed, and the Resolute pivoted, its engines flaring as it moved toward the coordinates. A few other ships followed, while the rest stayed behind to hold the line. As the ship approached Jupiter's shadow, the signal grew stronger. It was no longer just a pulse. It was a rhythm, intricate and deliberate, like a melody hidden in the static. Malik's hands hovered over his console, his face pale. "Captain, this isn't just a signal. It's an activation code." "Activation for what?" Harris asked, his voice sharp. Before Malik could answer, the ship's sensors flared. A massive object began to emerge from Jupiter's shadow, its edges outlined by the faint glow of reflected starlight. The crew stared in stunned silence as an entire fleet of ships came into view. They were unlike anything the humans or the Vorthax had ever built. Sleek and angular, their surfaces shimmered with an eerie black sheen that seemed to absorb the light around them. Their engines were silent, their weapons concealed, but their presence radiated power. "It's human," Malik whispered, as if saying the words aloud would break the spell. "These are human ships." Darius stepped closer to the viewport, his breath caught in his throat. "The Shadow Armada," he murmured. The name sent a ripple through the room. The Shadow Armada was a legend, a whispered story passed among soldiers and officers. It was said that humanity's best minds had secretly built an unstoppable fleet, hidden away until the time was right. Most dismissed it as a myth, a tale to inspire hope in dark times. But now, the myth was real. "Signal from the flagship," Malik said, breaking the stunned silence. "They're hailing us." "Put it through," Darius ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. A calm, authoritative voice filled the room. "This is Admiral Siren of the Shadow Armada. Captain Darius, your bravery has brought you here. Stand by for orders. The tide of this war is about to turn." The message ended as abruptly as it began. The crew looked to Darius, their fear replaced by a spark of hope. For the first time in years, humanity wasn't just surviving, it was fighting back. Outside, the Shadow Armada began to move, their engines igniting with a silent, ominous glow. The Vorthax ships hesitated, their sensors struggling to detect the new fleet. The battlefield, once tilted hopelessly in the Vorthax's favor, was shifting. Darius tightened his grip on the console. "All ships, hold position. The Shadow Armada is here." In the vast darkness of space, beneath Jupiter's shadow, humanity's hidden strength was finally revealed. And for the first time, the Vorthax knew fear. The hidden Armada. The vast expanse of Jupiter's shadow seemed to ripple as the Shadow Armada fully emerged, revealing its terrifying beauty. These ships weren't just weapons, they were masterpieces of human engineering. Their black, angular frames seemed to drink in the surrounding light, making them blend into the void. But now, they stepped out of the shadows, their presence undeniable. Captain Darius stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his heart pounding. The Shadow Armada was no myth. It was real, and it was here. "Admiral Saren, your fleet is extraordinary," Darius said over the comm channel, trying to steady his voice. "Why now? Why reveal yourselves after all these years?" Saren's voice returned, calm but resolute. "Captain, the Shadow Armada was built for one purpose, to strike when humanity's survival depended on it. That moment is now. The Vorthax pushed us to the brink, and they must be shown that humanity is not weak. We strike today, under Jupiter's shadow." The comm cut out, leaving Darius and his crew in stunned silence. A moment later, the Shadow Armada began to spread out, taking positions with precision and coordination that spoke of years of silent preparation. Their engines hummed faintly, vibrating through the void. "Captain," Malik called out, breaking Darius's thoughts. "The Vorthax mothership has detected the fleet. They're repositioning." On the display, the Vorthax ships adjusted their formation, focusing their forces toward the Shadow Armada. Their mothership, a massive behemoth bristling with weaponry, began to charge a terrifyingly bright energy core. "They're not hesitating," Harris muttered. "They're preparing to destroy everything in one strike." But as the Vorthax moved, the Shadow Armada remained eerily calm. They didn't fire. They didn't even engage. Instead, they seemed to glide into new positions, forming a perfect sphere around the Vorthax fleet. "What are they doing?" Harris asked, confusion etched on his face. "They're waiting," Darius replied, his voice quiet but full of awe. "They're studying the Vorthax." As the Shadow Armada maneuvered, the human fleet watched in stunned silence. Each move was deliberate, each position chosen with precision. Then, without warning, the first ship fired. It was a single beam of energy, thin and sharp, aimed directly at the Vorthax mothership's shield. The impact was silent, but the result was immediate. The mothership's shield flickered and then buckled at the point of impact, a ripple spreading through its protective barrier. "Direct hit," Malik exclaimed. "Their shields are destabilizing." Before the Vorthax could react, the rest of the Shadow Armada joined the attack. Beams of light shot out from every ship, converging on the mothership with pinpoint accuracy. The Vorthax fleet scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The Shadow Armada had disrupted their formation and targeted their most critical ship. "Admiral Saren to all Allied vessels," came the calm, steady voice over the comms. "Hold your fire. Let the Armada lead." The human fleet obeyed, watching in awe as the Shadow Armada dismantled the Vorthax strategy. Their weapons weren't just powerful, they were intelligent. Each shot was calculated, each strike designed to cause maximum damage with minimal effort. "Captain, look." Malik pointed to the display. One of the Shadow Armada ships had broken off from the main formation and was heading straight for the Vorthax mothership. "What are they doing?" Harris asked, his voice rising. They're going for the core, Darius realized. They're trying to shut down the mothership's weapon before it can fire. The single ship moved with terrifying speed, weaving through the chaos of battle. The Vorthax tried to intercept it, but the Shadow Armada covered its advance, cutting down any enemy ship that got too close. Finally, the lone vessel reached the mothership and disappeared into its shadow. For a moment, the battlefield went quiet, the tension palpable. "What's happening?" Malik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, the mothership shuddered. Its glowing energy core dimmed, then flared brightly before imploding in a silent burst of light. The surrounding Vorthax ships faltered, their movements growing erratic. "They've done it," Darius whispered. "They've taken out the mothership's weapon." Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Darius didn't celebrate. He watched as the Shadow Armada regrouped, their formation tight and unbroken. The Vorthax were in disarray, their fleet falling apart. But Darius knew the fight wasn't over. "Admiral Siren," he called over the comms. "What are your orders?" Siren's voice returned, calm and commanding. "The Vorthax are crippled but not defeated. We press the advantage. Captain Darius, rally your fleet. Humanity fights alongside the Shadow Armada today." As the Resolute joined the formation, Darius felt a surge of hope unlike anything he'd felt in years. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was fighting back. And with the Shadow Armada leading the charge, the Vorthax wouldn't know what hit them. The first strike. The Vorthax fleet hung in disarray, their confidence shaken by the sudden appearance of the Shadow Armada. The humans had never been this bold before, and their newfound allies moved with a precision that left no room for counterattacks. Yet, amidst the chaos, the Vorthax mothership, though damaged, still loomed, its massive structure a reminder of their overwhelming power. Captain Darius stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his eyes locked on the tactical display. The Shadow Armada had formed a tight assault line, cutting through the enemy with surgical strikes. But something about their strategy puzzled him. "They're not finishing off the smaller ships," Lieutenant Harris observed. "They're focusing all their fire on the mothership's defenses." Darius nodded, his thoughts racing. "They're planning something. The mothership isn't just their command center, it's their heart. If we take it out, the rest of their fleet will fall apart." As if in response to his thoughts, Admiral Siren's voice crackled over the comms. "Human fleet, this is the Shadow Armada. Hold position and provide cover fire. We are executing Phase 1 of the strike." "Phase 1," Harris muttered. "How many phases are there?" Darius ignored the comment, his focus on Siren's next move. On the display, several Shadow Armada ships broke formation and accelerated toward the Vorthax mothership. Their movements were swift and deliberate, weaving through enemy fire with an elegance that bordered on impossible. "They're going for the shield generators," Malik said, his voice filled with awe. "They're dismantling the defenses piece by piece." The first strike was brutal and efficient. The lead shadow ship fired a concentrated beam at one of the mothership's shield nodes, the shot so precise it bypassed the outer defenses entirely. The node exploded in a burst of light, and the Vorthax shields flickered, exposing a vulnerable section of the mothership's hull. "Direct hit," Malik exclaimed. "The shields are collapsing in sections." But the Vorthax were quick to adapt. Their smaller ships swarmed toward the attackers, firing relentlessly. The Shadow Armada retaliated. "They're charging their main weapon," Harris said, his voice grim. "If they fire that, it's over." Darius's mind raced. The Shadow Armada was too focused on dismantling the mothership to notice the weapon charging. He had to act. "All ships, target the weapon core. Hit it with everything you've got." The human fleet redirected their fire, aiming for the glowing section of the mothership. Their weapons weren't powerful enough to destroy it outright, but they could buy time for the Shadow Armada to finish their assault. The Vorthax retaliated fiercely, their ships swarming the human fleet in a desperate bid to protect the mothership. Explosions lit up the void as both sides took heavy losses. Yet, amidst the chaos, the human fleet held the line. Finally, a Shadow Armada ship broke through the enemy defenses and delivered the decisive blow. A beam of concentrated energy pierced the weapon core, triggering a chain reaction. The mothership shuddered violently as explosions ripped through its structure. Cheers erupted on the Resolute's bridge as the mothership began to collapse, its massive form breaking apart. The remaining Vorthax ships faltered, their movements disorganized and chaotic. "They're retreating," Malik said, disbelief in his voice. "We've won." Darius leaned back in his chair, his body heavy with relief. "Not yet," he said quietly, his eyes on the Shadow Armada. "This was only phase 1. Whatever comes next, we'll be ready." Beneath the shadow of Jupiter, humanity and the Shadow Armada stood united, their victory a spark of hope in the darkest of times. Sacrifice and strategy. The wreckage of the Vorthax mothership still floated in the dark, a ghostly reminder of the first victory beneath Jupiter's shadow. Yet for Captain Darius and his crew, there was no time to celebrate. The Shadow Armada remained in formation, their silent presence signaling that the fight was far from over. Admiral Siren's voice crackled over the comms. "Human fleet, this is Admiral Siren. The Vorthax are regrouping, and their command core is still operational. We have a window of opportunity to end this war, but it will require bold action." Darius leaned forward in his chair. "What do you need us to do, Admiral?" "The Vorthax flagship is carrying a critical system that controls their hive mind. If we destroy it, their fleet will lose coordination. But it's heavily fortified, and a direct assault would fail. We need to infiltrate the ship and disable it from within." A silence fell over the Resolute's bridge. Infiltrating a Vorthax ship was as close to a suicide mission as it got. Their ships were labyrinths of alien design, and their soldiers were brutal and relentless. "I'll lead the team," Darius said without hesitation. "Captain, you can't." Lieutenant Harris protested. "The fleet needs you here. The fleet needs this mission to succeed." Darius replied, his voice steady. "And I'm not asking anyone to take a risk I wouldn't take myself." Admiral Siren spoke again. "The Shadow Armada will cover the operation, but speed is essential. Assemble your team, Captain, and prepare for extraction. You'll have one chance." The infiltration team was small but skilled, a mix of human engineers, combat specialists, and Shadow Armada operatives. They boarded a sleek, stealth-class vessel designed for this kind of mission. As the ship detached from the Resolute, the rest of the fleet engaged the Vorthax, drawing their attention away from the infiltration effort. Inside the cramped ship, the tension was palpable. Darius glanced at the team, each member silent and focused. "We've all seen what the Vorthax are capable of," he said. "But we also know what we're fighting for. Stick to the plan, trust each other, and we'll make it out of this." The team nodded, their resolve solidifying. The ship slipped through the chaos of the battlefield, its stealth systems masking it from enemy sensors. The Shadow Armada provided a diversion, their ships launching precise strikes to keep the Vorthax occupied. As they neared the flagship, the massive alien structure loomed before them. Its surface was alive with shifting lights and spines, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. A docking port came into view, and the ship latched on with a quiet hiss. "This is it," Darius said, his voice low but firm. "Let's move." Inside the flagship, the air was thick with a strange metallic tang. The walls pulsed faintly, as if the ship itself was alive. The team moved quickly, their footsteps muffled by the sound-dampening material of their suits. "According to the schematics, the command core is 2 levels down," said Ensign Malik, who had joined the team to operate the hacking equipment. "We'll need to bypass 3 security gates to get there." The first gate came into view, a massive, organic-looking door guarded by 2 Vorthax soldiers. The team froze, blending into the shadows. Darius signaled for one of the shadow operatives, who moved silently, taking out the guards with swift precision. "Clear," the operative whispered. They moved through the gate, their pace quickening. But as they neared the second gate, the ship seemed to sense their presence. Alarms blared, and the corridors lit up with a harsh red glow. "Go. Move," Darius barked, raising his weapon. Vorthax soldiers poured into the corridors, their insectoid forms towering over the humans. The team fought fiercely, using every ounce of their training and equipment to hold them off. Darius led the charge, his shots precise and unyielding. "Captain, we're running out of time," Malik shouted, frantically hacking the second gate's control panel. "I need another minute." "Hold the line," Darius ordered, firing at an advancing soldier. The team formed a defensive perimeter, their movements synchronized despite the chaos. The second gate finally opened, and the team surged forward, leaving behind a trail of destruction. By the time they reached the command core, they were bloody but determined. The command core was a massive, glowing sphere suspended in the center of the room. Its surface shifted and pulsed, radiating a dangerous energy. "Malik, you're up," Darius said. Malik approached the core, his hands trembling slightly as he connected his equipment. "I'll overload the system, but it's going to trigger a chain reaction. We'll have minutes to get out." "Do it," Darius said, scanning the room for any sign of incoming threats. As Malik worked, the alarms grew louder. Vorthax soldiers stormed into the room, their weapons blazing. The team fought with everything they had, covering Malik as he finished the override. "It's done," Malik shouted. "Let's go." The team retreated, the ship shaking violently as the core began to overload. Explosions erupted behind them, and the corridors collapsed as they raced back to their ship. By the time they launched away from the flagship, the entire structure was engulfed in flames. The Vorthax fleet faltered, their movements chaotic and uncoordinated. On the bridge of the Resolute, Darius watched as the flagship disintegrated. The mission was a success, but the battle wasn't over yet. He turned to his crew, his voice steady. "Prepare for the final push. We've taken the heart. Now let's end this." Beneath Jupiter's shadow, the tides of war had shifted. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were fighting to win, against all odds. The destruction of the Vorthax flagship sent shockwaves through their fleet, literally and figuratively. The once unified hive mind was now fractured, their ships moving erratically, their formations collapsing. Yet, even without coordination, the Vorthax were far from defeated. Their sheer numbers and relentless nature posed a deadly threat. Captain Darius stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the tactical display. The Vorthax ships were in disarray, but he knew they were still dangerous. "Status report," he barked. "Enemy fleet is regrouping, Captain," Lieutenant Harris replied, his voice tense. "They're adapting faster than expected. They're focusing all fire on the Shadow Armada." Admiral Siren's calm voice came over the comms. "Captain Darius, we need your fleet to draw their attention. The Armada will execute the final assault, but we can't hold the line alone." Darius clenched his fists. The Shadow Armada had done the impossible, crippling the Vorthax command structure. Now it was up to the humans to buy them time to finish the job. "All ships," he ordered, his voice steady, "engage the enemy. Protect the Armada at all costs." The battered human fleet surged forward, their ships weaving through the chaos to target the nearest Vorthax vessels. Each shot, each maneuver, was a desperate attempt to hold the line. The odds were overwhelming, but retreat wasn't an option. On the battlefield, the Shadow Armada began their final push. Their ships moved in perfect synchronicity, a black wave of destruction sweeping through the Vorthax forces. Their target was clear, the massive energy core hidden within the remnants of the Vorthax fleet. Destroying it would ensure complete victory, but it was heavily guarded. Inside the Resolute, alarms blared as enemy fire rained down. "Shields at 40%, shouted Ensign Malik. "We can't take much more of this." "Keep firing," Darius commanded. We hold the line, no matter what." The ship shuddered under another hit, sparks flying from a nearby console. Darius gripped the edge of his chair, his eyes locked on the display. The Shadow Armada was closing in on the energy core, but they were under relentless attack. "We're not going to make it," Harris muttered, his voice barely audible. Darius turned to him, his expression fierce. "We didn't come this far to fail now. If this is our last stand, we make it count." Meanwhile, deep within the Shadow Armada's flagship, Admiral Sirin coordinated the final assault. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed the weight of the moment. "All units, target the core. Synchronize fire on my mark." The Armada's ships shifted formation, focusing their weapons on the glowing core. The Vorthax, realizing the threat, redirected their forces, swarming the Armada with everything they had left. Explosions lit up the void as ships on both sides were destroyed. Darius watched the scene unfold, his heart pounding. The Shadow Armada was taking heavy losses, and the human fleet was barely holding together. "We need to give them an opening," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Captain, that's suicide," Harris said, his voice breaking. "Maybe," Darius replied, his gaze unwavering. "But if we don't, we lose everything." He opened the comm channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Darius. We're going to break through their defenses and clear a path for the Shadow Armada. This is our moment. Humanity stands together. Humanity fights together." The response was immediate. The human ships rallied, their captains and crews willing to risk everything for one final push. They surged forward, their weapons blazing, drawing the Vorthax away from the Shadow Armada. The plan worked. The Shadow Armada seized the opening, their ships firing in perfect unison. Beams of energy converged on the Vorthax core, piercing its protective shields. The core glowed brighter and brighter, its energy becoming unstable. "We've got critical energy fluctuations in the core," Malik reported. "It's going to blow." "Pull back," Darius shouted. "All ships, retreat to a safe distance." The human and shadow fleets began to withdraw, their engines burning at maximum thrust. The Vorthax, disorganized and desperate, could only watch as their core overloaded. The explosion was silent but blinding, a massive burst of energy that consumed everything in its vicinity. When the light faded, the battlefield was eerily quiet. The Vorthax ships, now leaderless and without their hive mind, drifted aimlessly. The few that remained operational began to retreat, disappearing into the void. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew erupted into cheers, their exhaustion giving way to relief and joy. Darius sank into his chair, the weight of the battle finally hitting him. He glanced at the tactical display, seeing the Shadow Armada regrouping. Admiral Sirin's voice came over the comms. "The core is destroyed. The Vorthax are defeated. Humanity has prevailed." Darius allowed himself a small smile. "We couldn't have done it without you, Admiral." Sirin's tone softened. "And we couldn't have done it without the bravery of your fleet. This victory belongs to all of us." As the human and shadow ships began to regroup, Darius looked out at the vast expanse of space. Beneath Jupiter's shadow, they had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. But he knew the fight wasn't truly over. The Vorthax would return someday. And when they did, humanity would be ready. "Prepare a report for Earth," he said quietly. "They need to know what happened here, and what we've become capable of." For the first time in years, hope burned brightly. Humanity wasn't just surviving anymore. They were thriving, united and ready for whatever came next. The dawn of victory. The aftermath of the battle hung in silence, the vast expanse of space eerily calm after the chaos. Jupiter's shadow stretched long across the battlefield, now a graveyard for countless Vorthax ships. What had once seemed like humanity's end had become the birthplace of its greatest victory. Captain Darius stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring out at the wreckage. His crew was exhausted, but a quiet pride radiated from each of them. They had survived, and more than that, they had won. "Status report," Darius said, his voice steady but softer than usual. "Most of the Vorthax fleet is destroyed or retreating," Lieutenant Harris replied. "The remaining ships are scattering, no longer operating as a unit. The hive mind is gone." "And our fleet?" Harris hesitated. "We've taken heavy losses. Nearly half of our ships are gone, and many of the survivors are barely functional." Darius nodded grimly. The cost of victory was steep, but it had been necessary. He turned to Ensign Malik, who was still monitoring the comms. "Any word from the Shadow Armada?" "They're regrouping, sir," Malik said. "Admiral Sirin is requesting a joint meeting with the human fleet commanders." Darius allowed himself a small smile. "Patch them through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Admiral Sirin. Her expression was as calm and unreadable as ever, but there was a glint in her eyes that Darius hadn't seen before. Pride. "Captain Darius," she began, her voice measured. "Your fleet's courage was instrumental in today's victory. Humanity owes you a debt." "And we owe you ours," Darius replied. "The Shadow Armada turned the tide when all seemed lost. Without you, we wouldn't be standing here." Sirin's lips twitched in the faintest hint of a smile. "This battle was won together, Captain. And together, we must now prepare for what comes next." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The Vorthax had been defeated, but Darius knew Sirin was right. Their enemy wasn't gone forever. They would regroup, evolve, and return. "What's the plan, Admiral?" Darius asked. "We repair, rebuild, and strengthen our alliance," Sirin said. "The Shadow Armada was designed for moments like this, but we cannot fight alone. Humanity must stand united, not just with us, but with each other." Darius nodded. He had seen firsthand how fractured humanity had become during the war, with factions fighting over resources and survival. This victory was a chance to change that. As the fleets worked to recover and regroup, Darius took a moment to address his crew. The faces staring back at him were a mix of exhaustion and pride, each one carrying the weight of the battle they had just survived. "We've seen the worst of what the universe can throw at us," Darius began, "and yet we're still here, not just as survivors, but as victors." He paused, letting the words sink in. This victory wasn't just about defeating the Vorthax. It was about proving something to them, to ourselves, to the galaxy. Humanity is stronger than anyone thought. We are resilient. We are united. And we are capable of greatness. The crew erupted into cheers, their spirits lifted despite their fatigue. For the first time in years, hope wasn't just a distant dream. It was real, tangible, and alive. Later, as the Resolute floated amidst the wreckage, Darius found himself staring out at Jupiter. The massive planet had been a silent witness to everything, its shadow both a place of danger and a shield for humanity's greatest secret. "Captain," Harris said, approaching him, "what's next?" Darius didn't answer immediately. He thought of the Shadow Armada, still out there, their purpose far from over. He thought of Earth, still fragile but now with a spark of hope. And he thought of the Vorthax, retreating into the darkness, but surely plotting their return. "What's next?" he repeated, turning to Harris. "We prepare, we rebuild, and we make sure that when the Vorthax come back, we're ready." As he spoke, the faint glow of the Shadow Armada's ships caught his eye, their sleek forms blending into the void. They were a reminder that humanity's strength wasn't just in its technology or weapons. It was in its unity, its ingenuity, and its unyielding will to survive. In the final moments of the story, a single transmission from the Shadow Armada appeared on the comms. It was brief, almost cryptic, but it carried a message that would resonate across the galaxy. "Today, beneath Jupiter's shadow, we became more than survivors. We became a force to be reckoned with. Humanity has awakened, and the stars will never be the same." As the words faded, Darius smiled. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Humanity was ready to take its place among the stars, not as victims, but as warriors, explorers, and builders of a new destiny.